This is a story of high adventure on the highest of mountains. But, it's also an awful lot more. A young TV camera operator gets his first big break to film on Everest, and then has to come to terms with almost dying in an avalanche and the tragedy of losing friends in two of the biggest disasters ever to hit that mountain. What makes Joe French's book, Out of Mind, so special for me are not only his vivid descriptions of those dreadful, awful moments and aftermath that led almost inevitably to his post-traumatic stress, it's Joe's journey of recovery and discovery. And that happened in the forest above his home, which is at the foot of Ben Nevis in the Scottish Highlands. I think every person who loves the outdoors and wild places will understand the helpful, healing properties of time spent immersed in nature. That what can almost kill you can help to cure you. I've previously worked with Joe, and we've arranged to meet at Nevis Range, up among the trees. Very good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Congratulations on an excellent book.
Thank you. That's great. Out of Mind came about because I wanted to try and understand what was going on in my head after all the things I experienced on Everest and back home. And I didn't actually set out to write a book. I set out just to kind of write things down and try and give things a narrative. And out of that, I started to notice that I could start linking things in a way that I'd not thought about them before, and how spending time at the same time in the forest whilst I was writing, that I actually started to write about the forest as well. And so the forest became part of the writing, and whilst I was in the forest, I was barefoot running and going in the cold water, and that all became part of the same process, really. So it started as just me writing things down to understand what had been going on.
Because they do talk about writing being your therapy.
Mm-hmm.
But I wondered how much of that would be true, because you'd be having to, especially as a cameraman, replay those images in your mind. And I wasn't sure is that a good thing? Does that help? I mean, not does it help? Did it help?
It was tough, while I was writing, it was certainly releasing a lot of emotion that was still trapped inside. And so I was writing, and then I could only do kind of short bursts, really, and then I'd go and spend some time in the forest and go for a run. And as I was running, I was becoming really absorbed in my movement through the forest, and that was giving me some great perspective on it, actually. So the two things actually started to become the same thing: the writing and the running and the cold water. Three things, actually.
So when did it make the change from being your recovery journal, as it were, your therapy, to being actually this could be something that people might want to read? Because obviously your stepfather's a well-known author, Andrew Gregg, certainly in mountain literature. Just wondering at what point you thought, and again as a cameraman who normally is an observer behind the scenes, happy to put that much of themselves out there as a book.
Yeah, I guess that I'm once I get started on a project, I'm determined that I'm going to finish it. So once I started to see that there was actually a shape developing to my writing, and that the idea came onto me that actually I could try and take the reader on a run with me, on a journey. And so if I could start kind of moving through the forest and take the reader with me, it'd be a really great way to try and express what I've been going through. And whilst we're on that run, the reader can learn about these various events on Everest and at home, and then bring it all together in a coherent piece of work. And I guess as you say, I've grown up. My stepfather, Andrew Gregg's a writer. My mum, Leslie Glaister, is also a very accomplished novelist and poet. And so I've grown up around writers, so it's quite familiar to me. Though I've never written anything in depth myself. I've played before with words and poetry, and I'm a songwriter. I play guitar and write songs, and so it just kind of started to happen naturally. Actually, it wasn't like I say, it wasn't a conscious decision. But once I'd started doing it, I couldn't stop till it was finished.
No hesitation about putting yourself out there in quite such a vulnerable way.
Well, yes, of course. I mean, it's now it's out there. People can read about all these things that have been very private and very personal and very difficult to me.
Quite.
But
I mean, I saw a very different side. I mean, we don't need to know each other well, but we've worked together, and I thought, oh my goodness, there's quite a hell of a lot going on there.
Yeah. Well, I thought that if I was going to do it, I was going to do it properly, and I was going to be honest, and I was going to tell the story as it is, in the hope that people reading it, whether they've been through, low-level stress or high-level trauma, they can find something to relate to, and maybe it can help them in some way. I mean, I'm only writing from my own experience, but my hope is that my honesty can be helpful.
I suppose when we were working together, let's go back to that, because that was Triple Echo Productions. I think the last time was in 2010 in Harris. That was your, I suppose it wasn't your climbing apprenticeship. You'd done a lot of climbing by then, but it was in some ways part of your filmmaking apprenticeship.
100%. Meg and Richard Else at Triple Echo Productions taught me a hell of a lot, and I'm very, very grateful for them and Triple Echo. And I was lucky to get an apprenticeship with them, and I kind of started filming just around the Loch Arbour area, really, making my climbing films. And as I write about in the book, end up having kind of some epic adventures with Dave McLeod and so on. So I went from making my own stuff to quickly getting the opportunity through Triple Echo to be filming and editing for broadcast television with the Adventure Show. And I actually remember one of my first jobs was actually editing some of your rushes, I think, Simon.
Oh God, were they that bad?
It was good.
Actually, what I've just remembered now is when I was reading the stuff, and it's a brilliant sequence of you and Dave McLeod where he's getting across this traverse, and you're thinking, oh, that's brilliant, he's got across, oh my God, I've got to follow him. And Dave McLeod is a star climber. I'd forgot, was this before? Because we had breakfast with him when we were staying at that B&B. When we were doing our filming in Harris, he was over wrecking Stranulladale before the big climb. You must have already been doing all that. I hadn't realised you went back.
Yeah,
in that history with Dave.
Yeah, so Dave and I have got history right back from about.
See, I never knew any of that. You're sitting there having breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember that B&B actually. I remember that. Or he was prepping, wasn't he? And we were filming, and we had that funny incident where we were filming some of the kind of packages, the VTs, to go with the great
in case they had got stuck for a little while and had to work out a route.
Exactly. Yeah. And I seem to remember one time I had my radio mic on, and you were trying to get an interview sorted, and I think we were making someone stand about in the rain,
walk about with this collie dog, and he was a Gaelic speaker. Yeah, and he was swearing at us, and you said to me he's swearing, and I said, how do you know he's a Gaelic speaker? He said, believe me, I know he's swearing. You don't have to speak Gaelic to know that, because it was lashing down with rain. But it's a heck of a leap from that in 2010 to being on Everest in 2014. Your route took you via the Eiger. You could just tell me about, I don't know if you can tell me about the junction between the two, but certainly how the Eiger route took you to Everest, because Liz just said to me before she went out there, she said, does does he ever get the imposter syndrome? And I remember saying, at least everybody gets imposter syndrome. It must have been huge at that point. Or did you have the confidence of youth?
Well, at that point, yeah, I was just loving it. I mean, like you say, I'd kind of started doing these, editing your rushes and being on Stroll Ullerdale and doing this kind of thing. And then suddenly I'm on the Eiger and we're filming a big sizzle for this. Basically, a wingsuiter was going to jump from the summit of Everest in 2014. It was a huge live broadcast on NBC and Discovery. And he was going to land at base camp. We were going to film it live. I was going to be one of the summit cameramen. And it was actually Ed Wardle, who is a brilliant filmmaker, who gave me the opportunity for that. And I'd be forever grateful to him. So I went along with him to the Eiger to film the build up to it. And we were going to create a really sensational sizzle to kind of promote the show, and actually was there with Brian Hall as well. He was doing the safety, and Brian Hall's another real legend, legendary climber and a very good writer as well. His book High Risk is a classic as well. So being out with him and Ed Wardle in Switzerland was just incredible. And what we were trying to do was the wingsuiter was called Joby Ogwyn, and we were trying to put him on the summit of the Eiger and make it look like he was jumping from that to kind of create create an advert for the show, like I say. And so we got helicoptered up onto the high up across the North Face onto the Mittelegi Ridge, where we jumped out of the helicopter, and we were just presented with the most magnificent views you could ever imagine. I was suddenly couldn't stop filming. I was filming in every single direction, and while we waited for the jump, we thought we were going to get radioed to let us know that the jump was happening, but the radio call never came through.
And because you say in the book, and as someone who has occasionally looked through a camera, you were very aware of the thousands of pounds, or the price of putting you in that place to give you that opportunity. So you really, really better not miss this. Mm-hmm. So you've got a bit of the, what the hell am I doing here? You've got a bit of the, wow, just look around me, and you've got a bit of, oh my God, I better not get this wrong. And you very nearly do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, only because the radio call didn't come through. So suddenly I was filming away, and then all of a sudden we've got two wingsuiters coming towards us at 200 miles an hour, and my camera's facing the wrong way on a tripod, and I've got to figure that one out. Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
but you got it.
I got it. But I mean that just it's a good example of the joy, but also the pressure you're under as an adventure cameraman, producer, director, whatever. Is that
you can't say go back and do it again?
No, of course not. But also we get these opportunities to go to these amazing places, but a lot of the time we're under a lot of pressure and stress to get the shots, get the sequences, and so. Quite often I've visited. I've worked now in television for about 15 years now, and a lot of the countries I've been to, it's quite hard to make yourself be present there because you're so focused on the job. So you go to these amazing places like the Gobi Desert or the jungle in Borneo or Belize or wherever, and you're so focused behind the camera that you've actually got to make yourself kind of take stock and actually take in the beautiful surroundings that you're in.
Switzerland was just the taster. The main course was to be a massive live broadcast from Everest, filming the first wingsuit flight from its summit, broadcast live around the world.
It was a huge production with NBC and Discovery kind of co-pro and the biggest thing I'd ever been involved in.
Well, I mean, there has been anything that big. I mean, that is a massive production. You're going to go live across American network television from Everest. Crikey.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
You thought about the thousands to put you on the Eiger. Think about it must have been millions.
It was a big old production, and we actually had headpieces we were going to wear and speak live to New York via satellite link and get directed from the studio in New York. So I mean, it was absolutely wild to be involved in. So yes, it was all very, very exciting. Felt like a dream to be asked along on this production. Again, Ed Wardle was our lead cameraman there. It felt like an absolute dream to be out there. Until it became an absolute nightmare when 16 Sherpa were killed in the icefall when a huge serac collapsed. And
you need to explain maybe for people in Everest the icefall. There's this jumble of ice that everybody has to go through to get to the route from the Nepal side.
Yeah, so to get up to Camp 1 and Camp 2 in the Western Coombe, you have to go through the icefall, and the icefall kind of guards the way to Everest in some ways, and it's a big glacier that is moving up to about 3.5 feet a day, and there's big crevasses you've got to cross and ice towers you've got to climb, and it's just short of a mile long. So when you go in there, you really are kind of at the mercy of the conditions, and not only do you have all the danger around you, you always also have it above you. And what happened on that terrible day was that this serac carved off the western shoulder of Everest and just fell right down on the icefall, right where the Sherpa had stopped to mend one of the ladders that were crossing a crevasse.
And the Sherpa going first. This is part of a team who were there to prep the way for the season. Is that right? Have I got that right? Were they part of that?
Yeah, so they were going up to basically set up the camps and set up everything kind of higher up the mountain for people. That's how it's kind of done in stages, and there's a fixing team who come and fix the lines and so on. So yes, obviously the project was cancelled, and we were all absolutely devastated. To have lost our friends and to have kind of become so close to these people in a short space of time, but also just the knowledge of how much devastation it had caused through all the families that had lost their fathers, and it was just a really just a horrible thing to have to live through, and that's just from being an outsider coming in, let alone being part of that community, and it was really a really difficult time.
So the following year, presumably thinking things can only get better, you find yourself back on Everest again, 2015, and well.
Yeah, so in 2015 I got asked to go back to film a documentary about, to research a documentary about the unsung heroes of Everest, so the Sherpas and the doctors and the helicopter pilots and all the people that I'd seen in the previous year working so hard in the rescue and recovery effort after 2014, to go and film their story, and it was too good an opportunity to turn down, really. So you're not there as part of a massive team this time. It's a research team. Really. It's a research team, so I was just there as a research producer, and because of that, I kind of got to know everyone around base camp really well, and but unfortunately, it ended in an even bigger tragedy than the year before when Nepal was hit by 7.8 magnitude earthquake, and it triggered a huge avalanche above base camp, and that avalanche landed right on our camp. Actually, I was very lucky not to be in my tent, and was blown off my feet, and I suffocated in amongst the debris and the snow and the ice, and was very lucky to survive. But I did. 22 people weren't so lucky, and so yes, that was another awful thing to go through. I'd obviously gone through a pretty traumatic experience, actually thinking I didn't know if I was alive or dead for a brief time, and I kind of came out of that state to discover there was people not far from me that hadn't been so lucky, and they were I had to navigate the aftermath of the avalanche, which went on and on and on. We were stuck there for a whole 24 hours before we could get helicopter rescue, and then a whole week before I actually managed to come home.
Did you film?
I filmed a bit, and I didn't film. I filmed what I thought was appropriate to film, and I didn't film what I didn't think was appropriate to film. And beyond that, as a personal thing, did I want to be filming or did I want to be helping? And of course I wanted to be helping.
Vindicated, of course, when you went back the following year and you were thanked.
Yes, exactly, yes. And that was, that was very... I went back in 2016 to film another documentary, and it was I didn't know whether I should go back or not, really. After two narrow misses, but I felt another opportunity had come, and yes, I went back, and people thanked me for not filming them, which was very good to hear.
They didn't go, "Oh my God, Josie, what's going to go wrong?"
No.
Nobody said that. Oh, it's going to rain.
Yeah, be all right in the trees.
So have you got hobbit feet?
So my feet they've changed actually since I've been in the forest doing the barefoot running. They've definitely, the arches of them have risen, and my calves have stretched a bit, and the soles are so tough now. It's amazing how they change and how your body knows to adapt. But it takes a bit of time, and it took a lot of time and a lot of getting splinters out to begin with.
I mean, is it worth it? I mean, it sounds horrible. Or, because you're talking about going over stuff like this, branches like that, and having to avoid them. And, you're kind of thinking, why would you want to do that?
Well, that is a good question, Simon. But actually, that's precisely why I wanted to do it and wanted to run barefoot, is that it requires a lot of thought into how you're placing your feet and how you're moving. And I found that whilst I was kind of writing the book and going through all this trauma again, actually coming into the forest and becoming really absorbed in my movement gave me a little bit of a breathing space between me and the thoughts that I was kind of having. So actually that intensity that I needed to focus completely on my feet to avoid stepping on a branch or scuffing myself on a root and stubbing my toe or hurting myself was kind of part of the attraction to it, actually. Whilst I'm barefoot running, or just running with trainers on, or going in the cold water, or just in everyday life, what I try to be aware of is my breath. And I find that when I'm running, I'm not running fast in the forest, but I'm just breathing in and out, always through my nose, and just really being focused on that and trying to keep in a rhythm with that. And I found that since I've started doing that, I'm actually kind of more aware of my breath just in every situation. Now, just in general everyday life, and I find that is a very helpful tool to become grounded if you find yourself being lost in a sea of thoughts, is to come back to the breath and recenter from there, and that's been a big part of it as well. Well, after the 2014 tragedy, I returned home, and my wife Julie was diagnosed with cancer, cervical cancer, and we had a very intense period of time dealing with that. She was absolutely incredible. Her resilience throughout it was just inspirational, and she went through a very intensive treatment program with chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and brachytherapy, and so we'd had that went on for kind of half of the rest of 2014, and then 2015 came around in the spring, and I had this opportunity to go to Everest, and I wasn't sure whether I should go or not, but Julie had kind of made a good recovery. She absolutely was just so incredible throughout the whole process, and we felt that it was the right thing for me to go back. After all, I was only going to base camp, so what could go wrong? When I was running, I was kind of found all these deer trails that I was running and really enjoying following and becoming absorbed in my movement. And they kind of led through this forest to this really wonderful lochen, peat bog lochen, that was kind of right in the heart of the forest. And I really enjoyed going in for a dip in the cold water. And I found again, just that experience of being in the cold water brought me out of my kind of thoughts kind of into my body, and the feeling of cold on your skin, and actually again I found that it was very therapeutic. So going into the forest and moving through the trees and going into the cold water was a real great help, actually, and it's a process that I've continued regardless. I just think it's a good practice, just in general, to kind of keep on top of things, I think.
Before we started recording, I asked you, have you had PTSD or PTS? Have you suffered from post-traumatic stress, or has it become a disorder? I don't really understand the difference. Could you talk me through the difference and maybe answer the question that I'm not sure what the question is that I'm meant to be asking?
Well, I think that was the whole point of my book, and it was actually asking an open question to myself. Do I have post-traumatic stress? I think I definitely did have post-traumatic stress. But did I also was that becoming post-traumatic stress disorder? And I think it becomes PTSD once it starts kind of interfering with your life, kind of going forward, kind of months after the event. So I think it's very common to go through a traumatic event to have it replaying in your mind whilst it finds its kind of way to settle. But if it kind of keeps on kind of causing problems, then it becomes PTSD. So the book was really an exploration in myself as have I got this, and if I had, what were the triggers to it, and what was keeping me thinking about these things that had happened so long ago. So the way the forest helped me with that was that just being within the forest was a kind of space where I could almost leave the trauma behind for a while. In the trauma, and especially the trauma of writing it all down again and going through it.
Yeah, because that must have been hard.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. I mean, I do get asked a lot, was it cathartic? And it certainly was cathartic to a point, but it was also very challenging as well. And, asking myself these big, deep questions, wasn't easy. But writing it down felt like the best place I could put it, and because I'm quite a creative person, I guess, that it became part of this creation of the book Out of Mind.
Wouldn't necessarily work for everyone.
No,
the barefoot running and what I'm writing,
not.
But it worked for you.
It worked for me, and I can only speak from my own experience, and I think that the common theme is that what I was experiencing in the cold water and with the barefoot running is this kind of mindfulness and mindful meditation and just being aware of what's going on rather than being consumed with what's going on. And I think that you can find that in whatever. You can find that in gardening, or you can find that in walking, or you can just.
It's a moving meditation.
It's a moving meditation, exactly. Yeah. So that's all it was, and it's only because I have this forest, and I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by this wonderful forest here in Loch Arbour. That's moss lined. It's a completely unique environment. I think that. I mean, it might sound like not everyone's cup of tea, but it is fantastic getting your feet into the moss and moving through it. I've really, really found it a wonderful thing to do. People have been interested in the story, which is so I've been happy to tell it. And like I say, I think it's just.
Why do you think that? Why do you think it's caught people?
Why are they interested in it? Well, I mean, it is even objectively. Looking at it from basically in 1 year, the two biggest disasters ever on Everest and cancer in between is a hell of a thing to go through.
That's quite something that you seem to have gone through it and gone back out and worked as well.
Well, yeah, I think it's a case of carrying on. I mean, and finding ways of carrying on. Nature has been a big help in that, and finding solace in amongst the trees and in the cold water, and with the barefoot running has just really kind of helped in a way that nature has been so kind of devastating in many ways in what I've experienced out in Nepal, but it's also been so healing here back home in Scotland. So that's really kind of helped along the way, actually.
My thanks to Joe French, and if you're an outdoors person, I'm pretty sure you will enjoy Out of Mind. You'll notice there are no adverts in this podcast, so if you have enjoyed this and you could help support the hosting costs, which are $12 a month, then there's a link in the show notes to buy me a coffee. It's just a couple of quid and it will help. There's also a link at alwaysanotheradventure.com. And apart from anything else, it's a great encouragement to keep me making these and finding great adventurers to share their great adventures. I'm Simon Willis. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.